Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Full Quarter Podcast. My name is Mpho and I've got Tim Delace here with us to talk, and it's a special podcast today because we are going to be doing the South African T20 World Cup preview throughout the tournament. If you want to know what's going to happen, you're going to refer back to this podcast, and that's what we want to do to figure out who needs to go and where, who needs to do what they need to do. And this is our stake in the ground before the World Cup to say that this is what the Proteas need to do, this is what they look like, this is what their opponents look like, and where they're playing. Tim's got incredible stats about Melbourne, and he wants to drop a favorite spinner of mine. Or it's actually Perth, actually. And so those are the type of things we're going to be doing in this podcast. So please do like and share, subscribe, let everybody know, send through your comments, let us know if we're batshit crazy or if we're on the right track. I foresee not a lot of arguments, but anyway, let's get this going. Tim, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, mate. I'm just doing good. Cheering on our fellow Southern Africans at the same time as we do this podcast, but otherwise all good.
They need to break this wicket. Scotland are currently 60 for 2. Eight about one ball to 9, but obviously that's cricket. I'm looking at it right now. So come on, Zimbabwe. Come on. It would be so good for South Africa to start their World Cup campaign against our northern neighbors, because that's essentially the team that we're waiting for. It's either between Ireland. It's a winner of Group B or runner-up. It's winner of Group B.
It's winner.
Yes. Yeah. So, But actually, let's start with that, right? Last year, I sat here for our preview, Tim, and I kind of told everybody what South Africa need to do. They didn't do it, and they found themselves in trouble. It was beat Australia. Beat Australia, win your first 2 games, and then you can deal with the rest of the tournament like that. I know it's going to be the same thing, but let's have a look at South Africa's fixtures, and then I will go into my little sermon to kind of let everybody know what's going on. So, South Africa in this World Cup starts their campaign on Monday. We're recording this on Friday. This podcast will go out on Friday afternoon. Winner of Group B could either be... Actually, if it's winner of Group B, then it's not going to be Zimbabwe, but it could be Zimbabwe, or it could be Ireland, but it's most likely going to be Ireland in Hobart on Monday morning. Zimbabwe, please take more wickets and you could be playing ice in Hobart. That's the first game of the tournament. Then they play Bangladesh on Thursday next weekend at the SCG. Then they travel across the continent of Australia to play India at 1 p.m. on Sunday. That's going to be really crucial next week, Sunday. Then you've got the game against Pakistan again on Thursday in Sydney. And then you've got the final game against the Netherlands on the 6th of November at 2 a.m. I don't know why it's at 2 a.m., but anyway, fine. Here's my thing. We now know who we're facing. Ideally, you kind of had an inclination of who the teams that are going to come in, but this World Cup is set up just like the UAE one, essentially that you're not playing the best teams up front, right? Which could allow you a loss or 2, and you can bring it back. But because we got knocked out on net run rate the last time, and we had won 4 games, and it was a 3-way tie at the top, and we were the team at the bottom of that 3. This could happen again with India and Pakistan. Unless if you want to lose to Bangladesh and bring them in, by all means you can. And this is to the Proteas. But win your first 2 games. It doesn't matter. I know that Bangladesh beat us in an ODI series at home. I get it completely. But you have to beat Ireland. You have to beat Bangladesh. You then have a choice between India and Pakistan. You can split those games. You have to win one. You cannot lose both. If you lose both, you go home. You have to win one of those 2 games. And then the Netherlands is going to be your net run rate catch-up. But don't let the Netherlands be your net run rate catch-up. You need to beat Ireland. On the first day, you need to come buttoned up. You need to come ready to beat either Ireland or even Zimbabwe to make sure that you put down a marker in the ground for net run rate, as well as Bangladesh. And if you do that, you then have the luxury of going through those India and Pakistan games, knowing that the one thing that got you knocked out of the World Cup is sorted, and then all you need to do is you need to manage these two games and win one and lose the other. And in T20, it's largely okay. So that's where I'm at. And then obviously the Netherlands, you'll then have to bat first. And actually, not sure, but Netherlands bat second because you'd be chasing a net run rate. So essentially, bat second, try to bowl them out, and then you can figure out what your net run rate is, and then you can then figure out how you want to open. Tim, that's how I see this journey going. What do you say?
It's exactly as you said. I want to disagree. I'll see if I can
Oh,
find
well,
a. I'll see if
they
I
can
can.
lose to
I'll see.
Bangladesh.
No, I'll see if I can find an area where I can focus on. It's those first two games. It is those first two games. It was how we started the last World Cup. We started slowly. It cost us. We cannot afford to start slowly. As a South African side, we have a history of starting series slowly. Doesn't matter what format, we have a history of it. We cannot afford that to happen. We cannot afford that to happen. What concerns me is the makeup, not the makeup of our side, but the approach with which we go about our games. It's worked up to this point. You can't say it hasn't. We are in a good place where we can go far in this tournament. I do wonder though, when the situation requires us, when it requires us to score 60 in those first 6 overs, can we do it? Can we do it? Do we have the mental capacity to do it? Because there is going to come a game where we are going to be required to be able to do that. And then there's going to be passages in play where the bowling's going to be good, the power play bowling's going to be good in between overs, and we're going to have to just keep it within, but we're going to have to start well. That is the most important thing that I feel from this tournament. In the batting, we need to start well. The guys have done well. Most of the guys in the batting have had a good 2022 with the bat. They've upped their strike rates, they've upped their averages, they're looking good, they're looking fresh, so they are in a good place to put pressure on the opposition. The other thing is, the only team in this group that I fear from that point of view, from putting pressure from the beginning, is India. There's nobody else within this group that plays that way. We don't have to play against New Zealand with Finn Allen. We don't have to play against England with their modern approach with Butler. We don't have to play against David Warner. So those 3 teams start quickly from the beginning. They go and they attack. We don't have to play them. That is a huge, huge bonus for us in this group. I think we have a better group in terms of wanting to go far in this tournament. Yeah. Everything is there for us to do well. It's whether we take that opportunity.
And to a certain extent, I look at that Pakistan game and I'm sitting there going, it suits our approach a lot better. Obviously, Bangladesh, they don't have the same quality as South Africa has. And to a certain extent, Bangladesh is a mismatch. And even in the last World Cup, it was a mismatch. We bowled them out for like 100 and some change, and we couldn't get it in the required 11 overs. And that was the drama of last World Cup. It was that game. So for me, I look at it and I'm like, okay, cool. So you don't have to be big hitting. But and I look at Pakistan and it reminds me of the Australia game, right? But in my head, I would have actually loved Australia to be a little bit later in the tournament to allow these guys to get in. Now you've got a team in Ireland, or it might be Zim, depending, but it most likely will be Ireland, who are obviously fresh because they played competitive games. South Africa have only played one warm-up, and it was a short one because you bowled New Zealand out. And so you have a situation where you don't want those slow starts to happen, but they need to arrive in Hobart, guns blazing, on top. And from an approaches perspective, yes, India should top the group the way we look at it right now. But their problem is their bowling. Without Bumrah, are they the same? Yes, we saw in India bowling really well. When they come to Australia in these drop-in pitches, will they get the necessary support. And I think that's for everybody, I think, in this tournament. But to me, I look at that and I'm like, okay, cool, fine, fine. The bare minimum is you have to split India and Pakistan and win the rest. If you do that, you give yourself a chance, but it could go down to net run rate if for some reason somebody in the group. So, for instance, in that India Pakistan game that's happening, I think on Sunday, um, you want India to beat Pakistan, and then you know that Pakistan is the team you need to beat. You can allow India to beat you, but if you beat India, that brings Pakistan back in. You then have to make sure you beat Pakistan. And I know it's a little complicated, but the situation is if you have three teams in a group trying to fight away, you need one team to pull away, and you then need to beat the other team, and that's it. So it's okay for that team that tops the group to beat you, but then you need to beat the others, and that's what got us in trouble the last time at the last World Cup because England was the team that was supposed to pull away. We ended up beating England, but we forgot that we lost to Australia, and that's how we ended up getting ourselves knocked out. And so that's the situation that happens in this thing. That game, that Pakistan game, is your second last game. So you can actually go to Pakistan having lost India, knowing that that's your must-win game to get you into a semi-final. And if you do beat Pakistan in that game, then you're done. But if Pakistan beat India, then best believe that match in Perth is your must-win game because if you beat India, you are into that semi-final because then India effectively are out of two losses. Do not lose two games. That's how it's supposed to go. At least now we'll be able to see in the future. And to a certain extent, I think Pakistan in the same position the Proteas were last year, where that first game of the tournament is a must-win. There's no two ways about it. Whereas India can essentially cruise through the tournament because they know they're better. But in this situation, if Pakistan win on Sunday, you know who to beat, and that is India. And you and Pakistan go through. So that's essentially what it is. Tim, let's look at the squad. So our squad right now, oh, wrong one. Here's our squad. Our squad right now looks like this. All right. For our audio people, we've split it into three columns: the batters, the bowlers, and the all-rounders. We've decided to talk about each of the batters going down. Um, what I'm also going to do, I'm going to put up some batting stats as well as we talk to kind of give you a flavor of what it is. But from a batter's perspective, we had Bavuma, De Kock, Markram, Miller, Hendricks, Klaasen, Stubbs, and Rousseau. And so, Tim, let me start with the top four, and then you can go with the bottom four. So, Temba Bavuma arrives at this World Cup in the most wretched form. The problem is with this is that he is the captain. And the question then goes to the selectors and the rest of the team. What effect does having a Temba benching do to the rest of the team, the fielding, the bowling, the captaincy, and everything else? And the idea of carrying a batter in 2022 is a tough one to take. It's a really, really hard one to take. So for me, Tim, that's my biggest issue when it comes with Timber. But I look at his opening partner, Quinton de Kock. He arrived into this thing with on the back of wretched form, but in India, he did quite well to get himself back in. And he looks to start. And the question obviously is Timber play or doesn't play? And we'll talk about Visa Hendricks later on. Aiden Markram is in the form of his life. He's found T20 like a duck to water. I'm really impressed. He's been making me eat a lot of crow and making me apologize to all the haters out there who think I hate on Markram and hate on me in turn. He's really important to South Africa at that fourth position. And I think Rassie van der Dussen leaving the side gives him a lot more responsibility and a lot more room to actually be more destructive than he has. He's no longer doing the catch-up cricket that we were worried about, but he's there. And obviously the final man there, number 4, is David Miller. David Miller has been sensational. He has been the picture of consistency in this T20 side for South Africa, highest run scorer, and he is the one of the key in that lower middle order that really helps you out. I want to go through to some of the batting stats. You can see there Markram and Miller averaging 50 in the last 12 months for the Proteas in T20 cricket with strike rates of 155 and 176 respectively. You've also got Quinton de Kock, who I spoke about. He's striking at 121. That needs to be higher. And I think that's the one thing the Proteas need to be worried of coming in. But Temba Bavuma there, 155 runs, an average of 17, and a strike rate of 95 in the last 12 months. That's not good enough. that isn't good enough, and it's something the selectors need to really figure out, because how important is a captain in all of this? Tim, I'm going to hand you over to the bottom four. Well, they're not bottom four in my selection, but they should find a way in.
The bottom four in the list, yeah. Right, okay. So let's get the one who I have had a tough history with. I've been largely critical of Visa on this podcast. You can find lots of evidence of that if you go back into our archive. I've had to eat a lot of humble pie. To go so far from he shouldn't be in anywhere near the side to now say he probably should be in the 11. If you're picking strictly on performances over the last 12 months, Reza is making the 11. I don't think he will, but he's had a phenomenal year. Strike rate of 139, an average of 46 in 2022 is quite something. He's been fantastic. He's been absolutely fantastic, and it's been good to see. And he's been making a lot of 50s as well, not sort of 20s of 12 balls. Been making substantial scores. So he'll probably feel unlucky to miss out, because I think he will. I think we can both agree.
How can you do that? He's the highest boundary scorer in the last 12 months for the Proteas. Most runs scored, and somehow he's not going to make it in the side. They need to find a way to fit that in, and that's why the discussions need to be had around the leadership of the side. Is Timber captaincy that important to have him opening with a guy who has blown the lights out?
Yeah, well, like I as I said before, if you're picking strictly on the last 12 months, you're picking him. But we've spoken about Timber. We've spoken about Timber. We've spoken about what that means. If we drop him, if they put him in the as 12th man, the whole where we are as a country, where that puts the whole thing. It shouldn't, but it does. Again, it will be interesting. I'm sure there will be lots of discussion in the selection committees that they have before the game on Monday. I can't see it. I can't see Temba Bavuma not playing. I think they should drop him, but I just can't. I can't see them doing that.
The other problem is you can't drop the other opener. That's Quinny.
No, and you cannot drop the guy that I'm going to go with next, with Riley. I'm going to sort of mix up the list here.
Okay.
Riley has been the X factor. He's been the guy that has been able to go from ball one. Miller, fantastic year. This year, his numbers are incredible, but often it's taken him a while to get going. Often it's taken him a while to get into his innings. Whereas Riley started off with a couple of low scores, but he trusted the process. He said, no, I'm going to go hard. That is why I'm in the side. I'm in the side to go hard, and his numbers back that up. Strike rate over 180. His average there, as you see on the list, is 57. Average of 57 in T20 cricket is incredible. It is absolutely incredible. No, yes,
and
okay.
He's also gotten 100.
Yeah, he's got 100 not out, which obviously does help with his average. But the way that he's been able to do that, he had those first couple of failings recently in India, and he backed that up. He said, "No, I'm gonna dominate." What did he do? Scored 100. He is in incredible form. I think the right-left-hand combination as well is going to be very important in this World Cup. When they have these spinners coming on in the different grounds they're going to be playing, I think he's going to be a key player for South Africa in that number 3 spot. Interestingly, he did open in the one warm-up game that we did play. Again, I'm not reading too much into that. I'm reading into, let's get him into more runs and more and just playing. I don't think that they're necessarily thinking of opening with him. They could, but I think that they just wanted him to play, and they weren't necessarily thinking he's going to open. But hugely important. Another guy who I think is going to miss out purely on the fact that they've got Quinton there, and Quinton has come back into form, as we can see on the numbers there. Quinton, again, he's had a really good year. Strike rate 150 plus. If my numbers are correct, this is the best strike rate and average that he's had in his career.
Who, Quinton or Klaassen?
Klaassen.
Yes.
Klaassen. So Klaassen, we know that what his ability is, but Klaassen, over the last 3 or 4 years, has had a tendency to get to 20 and get out. He's had a tendency to start off well, hit a couple of sixes, get 20 off 10, and then get himself out. He's now matured as a player. He's now realised that if he wants to get in there 11, he needs to up his numbers. Average of 30 strike, and he's done that. He's answered the critics. He said, "I am here. Now it's up to you whether you pick me." Yes, I don't think he's going to get in the 11. Yeah, sorry. So
no, I'm saying let's actually talk to Klaassen's chance of making the side, because if you dropping Quinton is not an easy answer, because he's not batting in the middle order. If he was, it would have been a straight swap with Klaassen, because right now you could say Klaassen is batting better than Quinton de Kock. But the only problem is that you then have to reshuffle the deck. And in reshuffling the deck, the one answer would be moving Riley up, but you've got Reza then sitting on the side. And that's why it's so unfortunate for Reza, because effectively he's fighting for a spot for one man, and that's Temba, because moving Quinton out means you have to actually bring in another person, an opener and a wicketkeeper, or shift somebody up like Riley. So open with Riley and bring in Heinrich. And that's what makes Heinrich and Riley's position in the side really tough. The only time they can actually come into the side is if Quinton actually gets injured, or in essence, Timber gets injured, or Timber gets dropped and told he's going to be sitting on the bench and carrying drinks. And that's why it's so hard, because any team in world cricket is currently looking, because if we put up these batting stats, right, outside of, if you look at the top, even including Rassi, right, up until Heinrich, and okay, Tristan Stubbs is under 10 because of the runs, but everyone's striking at above 100 and at above 127. Obviously, Quinton is the only other issue, and Rassi is the only other issue. But everyone else would walk into any side in world cricket. Hayden Klaassen walks into any side in world cricket as a batter. But you've got Rousseau, you've got Markram, you've got Miller, and you've got the guy you're going to talk about next, and that is
Tristan Stubbs. Tristan Stubbs is that star quality, that individual player that can win the game on a coin toss. The way, and he showed it. South African viewers will have seen him last year in domestic cricket. International cricketers saw him against England, against the good opposition. He managed to show England fans and supporters exactly why there's so much hype about this boy. Again, you can read if you're watching us, you can read the numbers there. Strike rate is nearly 200. It's a small sample. Yeah, it's a small sample. Yeah, it's a small sample. Only 9 games, but boy, has this boy shown that he can do it on this world stage. This boy has the potential to hit all around the ground. So he's not a guy that you think you can absolutely restrict. Like you bowl wide Yorkers, okay, well he likes the leg side, we'll just bowl wide Yorkers. He has the ability to hit you over cover, hit you over cow corner, hit you over point. He has incredible power for such a guy who isn't necessarily that big, doesn't look that strong. like a Cameron Green. Cameron Green, you can see the power in Australia's Cameron Green. You can see it. Tristan Saps is quite sort of wily, but this boy is such a special talent. I don't think his bowling is going to be used in this, but it's more than useful if South Africa do need an over or two. But it's his batting. It's his batting that's going to be.
Yeah.
It's a
And
huge plus for South Africa. Particularly when South Africa have been relying in the last 2 years too much on David Miller. They've been having David Miller to get them out of trouble again and again and again. They've now got a younger version of David Miller in Tristan Stubbs, who has similar abilities as David. So it's a huge plus down there at where he's going to be batting in the lower middle order.
At these, so I think a little trick for everybody watching is to look at strike rate and averages as something you add together to kind of give you a bit of a sense of where it is. So, for instance, I would say anybody who has a combination of a strike rate and average of about 100, and you add them together about 165 upwards, that's pretty good, because obviously you want to strike high, but you also want the average to be pretty high as well. And so South Africa have quite a few of those guys who do that, and guys who have that combined thing of over 200 is something that is something that I don't think we've ever seen before in the South African batting lineup. And you've got that in that middle order of Markram, Miller, and Stubbs. And then you add Riley Rousseau in there as your number 3. Tim, is this the best batting team we've seen South Africa's ever sent to a World Cup?
In T20 cricket, without a doubt. I think that maybe the 1950 over World Cup might have been slightly better than this lot in the 50 over format. But in terms of T20 cricket, this is exceptional.
This is the best.
It is exceptional.
Okay, let's.
And yeah. I'll finish.
I just wanted us to move on to the bowlers.
Yeah.
So the other thing, obviously, the other side of the ball for South Africa, you've got Kagiso Rabada, Lungingiti, Anush Nokia, Keshav, and Shamsi. I'll talk to Kagiso. You'll come in with Lungi, and then we'll alternate like that. For me, Kagiso is really important to the side. I think he is the best death bowler in the side right now. We're not a great death bowling side. And Kagiso is an okay death bowler. He's not a world-class death bowler, and he's going to be so crucial in those back-end overs. He's also crucial at the top at setting the tone. He needs to have a great tournament for South Africa to go far and for South Africa to do really, really well. If Kagiso's flat, it's going to be tough for South Africa to try and restrict teams to under 160.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Lungi is an exceptional bowler in this format. I mean, he's an exceptional bowler all round, but in this format, this is his home. This is his bread and butter. This is where he can really make a huge difference to the South African side. It was just 2 years ago where he was the world's leading wicket taker. 2020, he was the world's leading wicket taker. So that just tells you just what an exceptional bowler he is.
And he's the highest wicket taker of the quicks, with obviously Anna, but I think with a better average of 15.
I think where he's going to be the best at is the death. I really think that South Africa. I'm not entirely sure with who they are settled on in the death, because we have struggled in that region, as you rightly point out. But Lungi at his best, for me, is the best at the death there. Will be also very, very important in those middle overs, trying to restrict the opposition. Changes in pace. He's got very good changes in pace, which I think will be very important in the bigger grounds in Australia.
Yeah. The other one, and I think this is where South Africa's composition is going to come into question, is fighting with Lungi, I think, for that other spot. I think Kagiso's settled as the one seamer. I'd like South Africa to go with 2 of these quicks. And so Anuf Nokia, he's the one. He has had a sincere. I think he's had a good 2022 after that injury. Um, just doesn't have the same skill set as Lungi, and I think that's what it is. He's got more enough pace, the most pace for anybody in this World Cup, and we need to use him sparingly going into the World Cup. And we're gonna and you spoke about that game in Perth, Tim, against India. Maybe that's where Anuk goes, and you go in with the three of Anuk, Lungi, and KG, and then you have one spinner in Keshav because you know that Shamsi struggles against India and it could not possibly be the best game. But you'll talk about that a little bit more. But to me, that's where the situation arises. Is that for me, Anrich is there. He's a great option. I think he's the great option on the bench, and he gives you something more. Doesn't have a lot of skills like Lungi. At the death is not a guy I'm not going to rely on, and so um, for me, that's the one thing about Anrich. But he needs to get some game time going through, and I wouldn't be surprised if maybe even against Pakistan, India, Pakistan, and maybe the Netherlands, we go in with a three-seam attack in those big grounds against at Adelaide and at the SCG as well as in Perth. But yeah, I think for me, that's what I'm thinking. But if I had to pick between him and Lungi, and sitting on the bench, for me, let's move over to the spinners, Tim. Maharaj, who
Keshav. Keshav is the guy that's going to restrict the opposition. If he's at his best, he's going to restrict. He's not going to be the massive wicket taker in the side, but he is going to play a crucial role within that middle overs, making sure that the opposition don't get big scores. It's going to be very interesting to see how they use him. Again, as you alluded to, he has struggled a little bit against the series against India recently. That shouldn't play too much of a part in how South Africa use him, because as you say, the Australian conditions are very, very different. I expect him to play most of the games. There's just a slight word of caution. If the analysts around the world watch that series against India, they will see ways in which you can attack Maharaj, in that you don't have to allow him, you don't have to just see him off. You don't have to just say, okay, well, you can go for 7 and over, and we don't lose a wicket, and we can focus on the other guys. He actually can be attacked in T20 cricket. I'm hoping they don't do that, because when he started, he was going for under 6. That first year, last year, he was going for under 6 and over. He was a real revelation in the T20 format. He's now going over 7s, so there's a big difference there. Again, I'm not overly upset with the over 7s. That's fine, but it's just there's a big difference in what he was doing last year. So it's just a word of caution, but still a very, very important player.
He bowled the most amount of overs, and I'm okay. Like, I'm okay with the South Africa going in with Keshav as the other bowler, because I've said this many times in the podcast. I think South Africa should play limited overs cricket around the world with 2 spinners, and that's why, like, talking about to Bray Shamsi, and that's the reason why Shamsi is always the number 1 on my list from a bowling perspective in this format, is because he takes wickets. He takes wickets. A strike rate of 15, which I think only is bettered by one Andile Pehlugwayo, which is wild, nonetheless. But for me, Shamsi is our guy. He struggles against India, and I think maybe in the India game you can consider dropping, but I think it is sacrilegious. But he needs to work out what he needs to do against India. They love him, and to a certain extent, against India, because he's a left arm wrist spinner, and this is the difference. Because I think if he was Imran Tahir with a traditional right arm leg spinner, India would struggle a little bit more compared to a guy who's bringing the ball back into a lot of the right-handers, right? And I think for me, that's the one thing. I think you just need to pair Shamsi properly from a batting perspective against guys who he takes the ball away from. And that's the reason why the Maharaj against India was a little bit easier, because Maharaj was playing wasn't getting the ball to straighten or turn away from the Indian batters, the right-handers, and it was just stock standard straight ball either coming in or holding its line. He needs the ball to hold its line a little bit more in order for him to take wickets, because if you want guys to hit against you, they're going to be hitting with the spin with the ball coming in, because that's your stock ball and that's easier. But if it holds its line, then obviously that's when you get balls being skied and balls going everywhere. And I think South Africa needs to be very careful with the spinners. And in the squad, I actually would have gone with another spinner as a spinning all-round option. And I would have gone with George Linder, largely because I need someone who can give me 4 overs. The only other guy who can do it is Aiden Markham, and I think in that India game, Aiden's going to come up with a lot more overs this World Cup. He's only bowled 9 in this past year. He's going to have to bowl a lot more, largely because of the fact that there will be times where we will need another spinner, and you might have to, in the event where we drop one of the spinners, Aiden's going to have to shoulder the burden, and a lot of that burden as well. And so for me, that's something that I think that's probably our weakness, is that department, the spin department, in effect, or the all-round department, in not having an all-rounder that I can rely on to give me 4 overs. It is just 4 overs, but as you saw there, in the last 12 months, Aiden's only bowled 9 overs. And so that's my worry. And you see Tristan Stubbs as well. So that's where I'm at right now. Is okay, the guy's only bowled 9 overs. Can I rely on him? The obvious answer is yes. But this is going to be a lot more trickier, especially with the bigger boundaries. I think you can survive with him. And that's why I take my chances in Perth with the bigger ground against Shamsi and Maharaj, because you're gonna have to try and clear 70 meters in Perth, square of the wicket, right? If the grounds are long, I'd be wary bowling my spinner. I'd be wary bowling my spinners because the sides are short. But that's when you have to play with the Anlofs and everyone else. But playing at the SEG, we're playing everything's pretty much oval shaped, so it's a little bit wider. Because they're big. But yeah, you know better than me, Tim. Last one is, I keep on going to the wrong slide, the all-rounders. I'll let you have Wayne.
Let me have Wayne, because he plays for Western Province.
He's your guy.
He's my guy. Yeah, I've been wanting him in the side. I've been wanting him in the setup. And to a large extent, I've been reasonably happy with his performances. I'm maybe thinking that he would have been slightly better in the bowling department in those death overs. Again, you got to take it with a caveat of salt. It's been in India. In India, with the dew, it's been hectic at times, very different conditions to what he's going to be playing in Australia. I think he could be the key. Yeah, a lot of people were saying that the Parnell injury, let's say the Proteas injury, is going to be costly. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. I don't. I don't think
right now.
I don't think. Yes, I am. I don't think.
Proteas is the best bowler in the last 12 months from South Africa. He's taken the most wickets.
Yeah, absolutely. But his changes in pace, his cutters, his variety, not just the fact that he's left arm, he's a very clever bowler. He's cleverer than Proteas, and Proteas has not been backing it up with the bat while he has been here in the last 12 months, if we're honest. So for me, it's an upgrade. We've got a strong top 6, very strong. The area of concern is what we needed. We needed variety in our attack. We needed somebody who can bowl cutters, slower balls, and he's got a couple of varieties of the slower balls. We needed somebody who could be relied on to come up with some sort of trickery. But Lakwai, who you mentioned, had lost his way a little bit in the last 12 months, if we're honest as well, which one of the reasons why Parnell is in the setup. I think he could be absolutely crucial. It'll be very interesting to see how South Africa use him. I don't think they'll use him at the top of the innings, but I think they'll use him pretty much everywhere else. He'll be he won't be set in his role. He'll be used at different times, at different innings, which is what he's good at. He's good at doing that. I think he's going to be very important to South Africa's performances.
For me, his batting needs to show. He needs to get to that level that he's shown us at domestic level. Like the strike rate of 77 isn't that great for a guy who's going to be batting at 7. And we're going to need our number 7 to win us games in the back.
Yeah, his batting one place too high. I definitely agree with that.
And we don't have, and the only other option we have there is Marco Jansen. And Marco's an interesting one for me. Because we know the potential he has with the bat, but he hasn't had the opportunity to play T20 cricket for South Africa. It's an X-factor move, and it's a potential move. For instance, for me, if you go 3 Siemens, I would put Marco ahead of Anrich in some instances. I wouldn't be vehemently against it if they pick Marco Jansen ahead of Anrich Nokia in this tournament, largely because of what Marco has done so far. And I hate this whole picking on all formats, but I think we've seen him in the IPL. We've seen what Marco can do. He's also can hit a long ball at the back end, and he can actually bat at 7 if it's for 4 overs. Do you get what I'm saying? If it's longer and you have a batting collapse, I'd rather have Wayne than be like Wayne, just drag us through for as long as possible. But Marco's a very interesting thing, and it's that spice that you add, that you put over this team, in essence, because the other idea is, why don't you play 7 batters and 4 bowlers and tell Aiden that he's bowling 4? Do you get what I'm saying? But that's dangerous. It really is dangerous, because you're basically saying 20% of your innings you're giving to a guy who's only bowled 9 overs in a thing, and so that's dangerous. So Marco gives you that extra added. I can go with 2 all-rounders. I can go with 2 all-rounders and Kagiso, and maybe even that India game. I'd even go with Marco, Wayne, Lungi, Kagiso, and Kesha with Aiden as your 6th bowler. I think that kind of helps, kind of works. It's a little too pace-heavy, but it is Perth. The question obviously is, do we have enough guys who can bowl change-ups to kind of surprise the Indians as we go along? Because those guys can hit a ball long, and no ground is too small for them. So those are the things that I'm thinking about, and that's why Marco being in that 15 kind of makes it interesting. Finally, Tim, we reached the point where I need you to tell me what your starting 11 is for Monday.
So starting 11 is going to be. Okay, I'm gonna go with my starting 11, not what I think it's going to be. My one. My starting 11 is going to be Reza, Quinton, Riley, Markram,
yes,
Miller, Stubbs.
That's a 6.
That's a 6. Parnell, Maharaj.
Yes.
And then it's going to be Parnell, and then it's going to be Lungi, Rabada, Shamsi.
We both agree on the same thing. My only worry is Timber. I kind of feel you can. I have the same 11 as you. So my angle is, I kind of feel you can give Timber one more chance, and that's against Thingy. But there's no way I'm dropping Reza. There is no way you can drop Reza. The India T20 series, I was fine with, because I understood the purpose of that for those two. We went into that series saying we need to get our openers fit and on form. Timber didn't finish the entire series and play in the back end of the ODIs. He didn't play in the first warm-up game. I don't even think he was going to play the second warm-up game by the looks of it, because it was raining as well. But that's another story for another day. So you find yourself in that conundrum. They needed to have made the call early. I hope they did. because by the looks of numbers alone, outside of the captaincy, does Timber's captaincy outside of the batting give you what Reza gives you with the batting? And that's the question that they need to figure out, is that if you are
Yeah.
saying that Timber is number one on the list, what the opportunity cost of having Timber there is the differential between the runs that Timber's going to score versus the differential against what Reza scores over and above what Timber brings as a captain. So if Timber can give you, or can, with his ingenuity and everything else, restrict you and get you whatever Reza gets you as an opener, fine, have him in there. And I think that's the question that we need to think about, is he should be dropped. There's no fun and games about it. There's no fighting it. But what does that do to what the rest of the team is? What does that do in the pressure moments in the bowling? Because a lot of these games are not lost on poor batting. Oh, if you bat poorly, you're going to lose. But the tighter ones, the games against India, the games against Pakistan, are lost, are tight, and they're lost on the decisions you make with the ball. And if you're saying you want to give it to David Miller, does that pressure in the World Cup, what does that do to David Miller? What does that pressure do to a Keshav Maharaj? We've seen that in the last World Cup with Timber. It got close, they did it well, they did it fine. Can you replicate that with someone else without necessarily taking the burden or without necessarily affecting their batting or whatever they're there to do? And I think that's where, if the selectors say yes to this, then I think the selectors might have gone the wrong route. Because in a shortened format of the game like this, I do think you can manufacture the captaincy from the side of the field. You can help these guys figure out who's bowling where and when. You can send messages around. You can do a lot of those things because everyone's sitting in the dugout.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm the
Yeah.
reason. I'm sitting there going. It's not like Test cricket where you're sitting there for hours and hours on end. This is short. It's sharp. It's quick. And so for me, I'm okay. So like guys, if you see Timbers on the team sheet against Ireland, to me that's his last chance to learn. If he doesn't give me a 20 at about 120, there's no reason for me to give him Bangladesh because I've got someone red hot sitting on the side, right? But from a World Cup perspective, Reza needs to get the entire World Cup. This top six that you named of Reza, Quinton, Riley, Tristan, David, and Aiden. No, I mixed them around a
I
bit
know,
again.
yes, but
They need to play Ireland, they need to play Bangladesh, because when you come to India, we need at least three of them firing. We need at least three of them in this tournament feeling comfortable with the pitches, feeling ready to take on teams, because that's what's going to win us this game. You can't always, the psychological effects of what it does to the rest of the batting lineup, knowing that effectively you're either going to have to up your game above what you normally do, or you're always going to be on the back foot because you lost a wicket early, and it wasn't because of a good ball, but it was because somebody's off form. And I think that's the thing, and I hope the conversations are being had, and I hope, and this is a moment of growth, a moment of maturity for people to do things like this and to say that our captain's not on form, and that's the line, right? We've
yeah,
tried. He's here. He's an important member of the leadership team. Out of the batters in the country, he is still a top guy. It's just that at this point in time, we're looking for horses for courses, and unfortunately, this one horse is off form. And this is the reason why we have a leadership group. And
yeah,
that's the messaging that needs to come out of this thing. But Monday, I hope Reza plays. If he doesn't, Timber needs to sharp because that's a net run rate game as well. Really important. And as you've spoken about Timber, approach needs to be on point. And that's the thing about Tristan Stubbs that I think we didn't touch on. Tristan has enabled us to be able to play that aggressive type of cricket. Even if we've lost balls in the front end or it's been tough in the front end, you always know that Tristan's there to. It's an accelerant, but it would be nice to accelerate when you're 160 at over 15 and you take it to 220. It'd be nice to accelerate when you're 140 at over 15 and you take it to 190 on a tough pitch. Do you get what I'm saying? That's
Yeah.
he has forced Mark Boucher's approach of cautious, let's have wickets in hand, to be like, actually, dang it, if Tristan Stubbs gets 10 overs, scoring 70, we're winning. And so that for me is where we are in this team. And don't be surprised if Marco and Wayne get swapped out in this World Cup. Don't be surprised. Do not be surprised. But yeah, for me, that's it. Proteas, you know what you need to do. Tim, any final words before the World Cup? Because, oh yes, where do you think, what's the expectation for this team? Where does this team finish at this World Cup?
This team has to, for me, and I know this is big, but it's based on where everybody else is. Everybody else is not in a great place. There isn't a team that I'm thinking, oh, crikey, I'm terrified of them. There isn't a team that is absolutely on song, doing wonderful things. I mean, I'm just digressing slightly, but even a team like Australia, where they got Cameron Green, who's had a fantastic 2022, yet they're saying he's not going to make the 11. He's in the squad, but he's not going to make the 11,
like
which is just crazy. But anyway, so with that in mind, it's a final. This team has to make the final. And then when you make the final, anything can happen. Literally anything can happen. Games like of this format are won on a coin toss. We have seen the closeness of these games in the qualifiers. These qualifiers have been high intensity. Games could have gone either way at large parts of the game. Fine margins. But I think this team, with this group, we've got a favourable group. Whoever we play on Monday, it is a favourable group. As I mentioned, the teams that we are not playing. So we have time to get to our peak. We're not going to, hopefully not going to peak too early. We're going to get a peak semi-final time, final time. It's a final. Have to make the final and then see what happens.
Yeah, and truly that's important. I think the peaking is important. I think, and if you look at, I think England last year, they won first 4 games, lost to South Africa, and it just necessitated a run of losses going into that semi-final. And that's the only team where I look at them like, crikey, oh Lord, how do we? But England's bowling is, and that's essentially what it is. Whereas I look at my team, I'm like, okay, our bowling has always been strong, been our calling card. We can use that, and our batting has now gone to the level where it's just up there with our bowling. I think the most balanced side in the world. And I said previously on other pods, championship or bust. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Championship or bust, but to get to the final. Get to the final. They have to get to the final. Outside of that, good luck to the Proteas. Don't mess up the first game. Don't lose to Bangladesh. Please. Your World Cup starts against India next week, Sunday. You need to win these first 2 games, and then we can talk about what we need to do. Outside of that, thank you very much, Tim. To everybody, enjoy. And yeah, like, subscribe, follow us. The audio is going to be up as well. Enjoy this weekend because Monday, well, it starts tomorrow with Australia and New Zealand, but we don't.
For us, for us, it's Monday.
Finn Allen is a treat. Devon Connor is a treat. But yeah, like take the weekend, go do whatever you do, watch soccer, do all these things, and then Monday we're in the morning even. So 10 a.m. Be ready. But outside of that, thank you very much, Tim. And yeah, what a day, what a game. Goodbye, everybody. And the silence.